All right, everyone, welcome back to the Deep Dive. We got some really interesting material here from a listener focusing on men's mental health. And specifically, it tackles that huge barrier,
Hmm.
stigma.
Yeah, it's a big one.
The sources dive right into this idea, something we've all heard, that guys are just taught to, tough it out.
Shove it down, deal with it alone.
Exactly. But the material's pretty blunt about it. That's silence.
Mm.
It says it can be, well, deadly.
Absolutely.
So today, let's unpack what these sources say about where this stigma comes from and what it actually does to guys.
Okay. Well, one of the first things that jumps out is how it traces that tough it out idea way back. The conditioning from a young age. Be strong, be stoic, don't rely on anyone.
Right, self-reliance, which
Wow.
isn't bad in itself, but
But the pressure from those expectations, yeah, it's described as creating this intense internal environment and admitting you're struggling, saying, I'm not okay. It can feel like failing, like letting people down.
yeah, I can see that.
But the material flips that script. It argues pretty powerfully, actually, that saying you're hurting isn't failure. It's the first essential step to getting better.
So it's reframing vulnerability, not as weakness, but maybe as courage.
Exactly, as a necessary kind of strength. That's a really critical point in these sources.
Okay, so what happens if that step isn't taken? If the pressure just builds? The sources talk about masking, how men often hide their struggles instead of asking for help.
Right, and the material gives examples of how that happens. Things like maybe throwing yourself into work, just total distraction.
Or, yeah, turning to alcohol, maybe drugs.
Definitely. Or
Huh.
risky behaviors. Or just pulling away, isolating yourself completely.
And the sources point out that stuff doesn't actually fix anything, does it?
No, quite the opposite. It usually makes the root problem worse. They're described as temporary fixes that just build the walls higher, really.
Okay, so you've got the stigma, the pressure, the masking, the unhealthy coping.
Yeah.
Where does that lead? The material connects these dots to something really serious: the increased suicide risk for men.
Yeah, the numbers presented are, well, they're alarming, men being more than 3 times as likely to die by suicide compared to women.
And the sources directly link that shocking statistic to the stigma, right? Plus, maybe lack of access to the right kind of care and just that difficulty even expressing emotional pain.
Yes, and it specifically mentions this can be even more acute for veterans.
Carrying those invisible wounds, as the sources put it. It's like a compounding effect.
Which leads to a really important question the material tackles. If guys aren't always showing sadness, how do we even know they're struggling?
Good question. How do these issues show up differently?
Well, the sources highlight this. Depression, for instance, might not look like crying. It could be more like constant irritability or feeling completely wiped out, exhausted, maybe even physical aches.
Okay. Less obvious, maybe.
Totally. And anxiety, often tied to things like money worries, job stress, losing someone. But it gets internalized, not talked about.
Right. And substance use often starts as that coping mechanism we mentioned.
Yeah, before it sort of spirals out of control. So recognizing these less typical signs is crucial.
Okay, so recognizing those different signs, the irritability, the fatigue, that's key. And the material really emphasizes this point. Early detection saves lives.
Absolutely. The sooner you spot it, the sooner healing can actually start.
And the sources mention the need for safe spaces, places where guys, and it mentions veterans specifically here, can actually feel okay opening up.
Yeah, creating environments where taking back control feels possible.
So pulling it all together, the big message seems to be, understand the signs might look different in men. Spotting them is step one.
And despite the tough stuff, there's a real message of hope woven through this material. Early detection, safe spaces to talk. They genuinely save lives.
Yeah. And the sources end with this really powerful statement aimed right at the stigma. It says, struggling doesn't mean you're weak.
It just means you're human.
Exactly. You're human. And you don't have to carry it all by yourself. Healing is possible.
And it starts really with speaking up. And just as a final thought, the sources kind of nudge you to think about what comes next, suggesting we look at how trauma affects identity, implying that understanding that connection is part of overcoming the stigma and, well, rebuilding. Something to chew on.
Definitely something to think about. We'll pick up there next time.